Let's talk about one of the biggest, most fundamental questions out there. Why are some countries incredibly rich while others are just poor? It's a puzzle that has stumped economists for centuries, and this year's Nobel Prize went to a group of researchers who came up with a groundbreaking answer that truly changes how you see the world. I mean, really think about it. In our hyper-connected 21st century world, how can it be that some nations have staggering wealth while others seem completely trapped in a cycle of poverty? The work of Daron Acemoglu, Simon Johnson, and James Robinson gives us a powerful and, honestly, a surprisingly clear answer. Okay, let's dive into this. To really get a handle on what we're talking about, the scale of this gap is just mind-blowing. As Daron Acemoglu himself pointed out, the richest countries today are about 63 times wealthier than the poorest. Not twice as wealthy, not 10 times, 63 times. How does a gap that enormous even happen? So, to solve this massive prosperity puzzle, the laureates basically became historical detectives. They started looking for clues, not in modern spreadsheets, but deep in the pages of history. You know, for a long, long time, the easy answers were things like a country's climate, its location, or what natural resources it had. But those theories, they never quite added up. They couldn't explain the massive differences we see all over the globe. Acemoglu, Johnson, and Robinson had a different idea, that the real answer was hiding in one specific, transformative period of history. What they did was brilliant. They realized that European colonization, which kicked off about 500 years ago, acted as a huge global natural experiment. It was this unique moment in time when all these different political and economic systems were suddenly imposed on societies all around the world. And that created the perfect laboratory to study how prosperity or poverty really takes root. And the very first clue they uncovered was an absolute shocker. Seriously, it turned everything we thought we knew completely on its head. They found something they call a reversal of fortune. Get this. The places that were the most prosperous, the most developed, the most densely populated back in the year 1500, think of the incredible Aztec and Inca empires. Those very regions are, on average, relatively poor today. And the opposite is also true. The sparsely populated, less developed areas from 500 years ago are now some of the richest places on Earth. This chart just lays it out so clearly. You can see the pattern right there. The more prosperous a place was in 1500, the less prosperous it tends to be today, and vice versa. So, what on earth could explain such a dramatic, total reversal? Well, the answer came down to a pretty grim but powerful factor: settler mortality. See, in places where European colonizers faced incredibly high death rates from diseases like malaria and yellow fever, they didn't plan on sticking around. They set up purely extractive states designed to just grab as much wealth as possible as quickly as possible. But in places where the climate was healthier, places they could actually settle down and build a life, they created institutions designed to protect their own rights and to foster long-term growth. And this is where it all clicks. This giant historical experiment revealed the true engine of prosperity. It wasn't resources. It wasn't geography. It was institutions. So, what do we mean by institutions? Well, you can think of them as the rules of the game for a society. They're the whole shebang. The formal laws, the constitutions, the property rights, but also the informal norms that shape how we all interact with each other. In short, they're kind of like the fundamental operating system for an entire country. And this slide right here shows their core framework, and it's beautifully simple. It starts with political power. Who gets to decide the rules? That power then shapes the economic institutions, the rules of the game themselves. And those rules finally produce the economic outcomes, whether that's widespread prosperity or crushing poverty. This insight was a massive deal. It was a huge architectural rupture in economics. It showed that prosperity isn't really about what a country has, not its gold mines, its harbors, or its climate. It's about the rules it lives by, and crucially, who has the power to write those rules. So this framework leads us to two fundamentally different blueprints for how you can organize a society, two completely different paths a country can take. The laureates call these two blueprints inclusive and extractive. And as we're about to see, which path a nation goes down pretty much determines its long-term destiny. First, you have inclusive institutions. This is the blueprint for prosperity. They create secure property rights for everyone, not just the elite. They uphold the rule of law. They have open, competitive markets. When you have these things, regular people have the incentive to work hard, to invest, and to innovate because they know they'll be able to enjoy the rewards of their efforts. And then you have the other blueprint, extractive institutions. These are designed by a small elite for a small elite. Their entire purpose is to extract wealth and resources from the many to benefit the few. They crush incentives, they throw up barriers to new ideas and competition, and they concentrate all the power at the top, which ultimately leads to stagnation for just about everyone else.
Okay, this all brings us to the final and maybe the most difficult part of the entire puzzle. If one blueprint so clearly leads to poverty and failure, why on earth do so many countries stay stuck on that path?
It's the totally logical question, right? I mean, if inclusive rules make the whole economic pie bigger for everybody, why wouldn't the powerful elites just switch over? Wouldn't they be better off too? Well, the answer isn't about economics. It's about the fear of losing power.
This is what the laureates call the commitment problem, or the political replacement effect. Elites in charge of extractive systems know that economic reforms that create prosperity, like strengthening property rights for everyone, will also start to distribute political power more broadly. And they're terrified that the shift in power will eventually lead to them getting kicked out. So they make a choice. They would rather have total control of a smaller, stagnant economic pie than risk losing their grip on power in a larger, growing one. For them, the system isn't broken. The extractive institutions persist because they are working perfectly for the people with the power to maintain them. And this isn't just some dusty old lesson from history. It's incredibly relevant today. As Daron Acemoglu himself warned in his Nobel Prize speech, the very same inclusive institutions that created so much prosperity are now under threat all around the globe. The same dynamics, the same struggles over power and rules are playing out right now. Which brings us right back to where we started. Why are some countries rich and others poor? This Nobel-winning research gives us a clear answer. It all comes down to the rules we live by. And that forces every single one of us to ask a tough question about our own societies. Are our rules being written to include everyone or to benefit just a few? The answer to that question will define what prosperity looks like for all of us.